We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host this morning. I want to thank you for joining with us. I appreciate your attendance. I want to cover a couple of issues this morning which are of paramount importance to us as a nation. And I've posted some information and some stories up on Facebook and our website that you need to be aware of. And I think you'll find that they're not only disturbing to you, but important to your understanding of exactly where we stand in the new world order, the new police state, the new tyrannical United States of America. The nation of our forefathers is gone, folks, and I think it's time that we just admit it. I think it's time that we recognize it, that we take a look at what the next steps would be to try to resolve where we have fallen to. And I think that we need to have a serious discussion with ourselves about how much further we're willing to let this slide. So, to start off with, they have actually, the NSA announced yesterday that they're going to be reducing the number of people that work at the NSA in an effort to reduce leaks. So what this really says, and they're going to reduce it by 90%, by the way. Their entire staff is going to be reduced 90%. So let's understand what that really means, because as critical thinkers, we read between the lines, right? And so what that tells us is that they're going to reduce the staff by 90% from human interaction with all of this data information and the way in which it's seen, reviewed, accessed, and so forth. What that tells us is that they're reducing by 90% the number of whistleblowers out there who might squeal about what's really happening. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the real focus of this project. That's what this real reduction is about. It has nothing to do with giving us the assurance that these people would not, individual human beings would not have access, as an example, to sensitive data. It has nothing to do with that. In fact, what they're really concerned with is not do human beings have sensitive access or data access to sensitive American information. What they're really concerned about is, will those humans turn around and rat us out? That's the real issue. And so computers won't squeal. That's the simple reality of it. Computers don't tell tales. So the real goal is cut this down from humans to machines. The machines won't rat. We're covered, and quite frankly, no one will ever know the difference. And so I find that a deplorable solution to the problem, because the real problem here is not, are there too many people who have access to our information? The problem is that they have the information in the first place. Okay, I'm going to cover a lot of news today, and I want you guys to stick with me and ride this out, because there's a ton of things that you need to be aware of. Gov Christie signed 10 new gun bills into law in the state of New Jersey, in the police state of New Jersey. Now, I come from New Jersey, many of you know that, and it is and already has been a very, very gun-unfriendly state. In fact, it's about one of the only ones left in the nation that doesn't have concealed carry as a shall or must issue. In other words, their attitude is they say, well, we have concealed carry, but you got to apply for a permit and you got to have reasoning for it. The only people who get a permit to carry in New Jersey are politicians and well-connected financiers of those politicians. I mean, I knew, for an example, a guy who was a jewelry dealer, and he couldn't get one, and he carried millions upon millions of dollars worth of jewels around with him all the time. And he couldn't get one. So you can't get one to defend yourself. You can only get one if you're a politician or you're a financier or a friend of a politician. And that's really what it comes down to. But Chris Christie, the conservative poster boy, is or has actually signed 10 new gun bills into law. People, this is why I tell you, don't use the word conservative to describe yourself. Because what that means is that you are accepting and want to conserve the status quo. And I got to tell you, if you think that this is an acceptable position in our existential existence here in this time and space as the United States of America, we don't have anything further to talk about. We cannot afford to conserve this position. The status quo of where things stand right now is absolute police state tyranny. And if you don't believe me, just wait a little while, open your eyes, look around you, you'll see it. But conserving that is not my goal, and it shouldn't be yours. What we do want to call ourselves is patriots. I know that's an inflaming word. It ought to be. We ought to be showing the conservatives how it's really done. And so I will never use the word conservative to describe myself. When someone says to me, well, are you a conservative or a progressive or a liberal? I say I'm neither. I'm a patriot. I believe that we belong as a constitutional republic. I fight daily for the restoration of a constitutional republic. We need the Constitution as the foundational base rule of law, not a rule of men. Never use the word conservative again to describe yourself. It is a poison that what essentially it does is that it puts you in a position where you are accepting of where things stand today. And that gives these Republicans who are in Congress all the leverage they need to say, well, all these conservatives are with me. Don't give them that luxury. These folks are all going to, at some point in time, have to stand and explain how they got to the position they're in and how we got to the position we're in as a result of their leadership and alleged representation. So mark my words, don't use the word conservative anymore. Begin calling yourself a patriot and stick to it. Change your language. They do it all the time. The progressive ilk in this country is changing the way in which they speak. You should do the same. But do it with the right approach, the right ideas, the right mentality, and the right concepts behind it. All right. The U.S. is now going to let in thousands of Syrian refugees. Okay. This will be good for America, right? Not. You can't allow, every time there's a war, first of all, they're breaking the rules on refugee application. Normally the rules are that a nation has to be in conflict for 5 years in order to let in refugees. But I'll tell you how other countries do it, which ought to be a model for us. You let them in until the end of the conflict. Then they go home, and they can apply for citizenship the same way as everyone else has. But you see, once you let refugees in, we have no idea what their back-end connections are. We don't know who their families are. We don't know who their relatives are. We don't know what their ideologies are. We don't know what their perceptions are of what's right and wrong. Now, they're going to tell us what we want to hear in order to let them in. So you can't go by that. And, you know, the Department of State says they scrutinize these people very, very closely. They get the highest levels of scrutiny, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem with that, of course, is that, one, the State Department is notoriously incompetent when it comes to screening anyone, number one. And number two, the real issue here is, why are we allowing them permanent access to the nation? Once their conflict is over, they go home. And, you know, the real problem with the access review, or I should say the security review by the Department of State, the real issue with that is that, you know, they got to kind of take their word for it. These nations who are in conflict because they're under tyranny and abuse, they don't really have a good system of record keeping. They don't have birth and death records, and they don't have trackable histories you can go back and look at. We don't have information about who their families and their relationships are, whether they're natural hereditary relationships through parentage, or whether it's through marriage, or whatever the case may be. But you see, we don't know. I mean, look, we already have enough terrorists in the United States right now, including literally probably 500,000 of them in Washington. So why would we let in more? Well, you only got to look back at the last statement I just made. Terrorists are letting in more terrorists because that ultimately is their goal. That's why we're on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's why we refuse to use the word Islamic. That's why we refuse to use the word Muslim terrorist. That's why this president refuses to stand up and tell the American people what the real truth is. He's a Muslim, or at least a Muslim sympathizer, and he's all for the advent and the institution of Islamic radicalism in the United States. He believes it. He wants it. He seeks it. Make no mistake about it. Okay, there is so much news out there this morning. I know I'm tearing through this stuff at a rate of speed that's stunning. But all of this stuff is up on our Facebook page. Please get over there. Even if you're not a Facebook user, you can still obtain all this information because it's a public Facebook page. So you don't have to be a user. You don't have to be registered with Facebook or anything else. You won't be able to comment, but you will be able to click and link through to the stories. And, you know, that's one of the ways in which America's Voice Now and I share information with you. My job is to educate you, inform you, motivate you to take action. And so by educating you, or the way in which I educate you is, one, by this radio program, and two, by giving you articles and news and information that you need to read. Patriotic, true information. This is the truth the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. Now, I'm pretty careful about vetting the stories that I do. I generally don't post anything up there that is not legitimate. I will, vet it. If I see it's out there on one of these, kind of not quite so primetime websites, I usually do a good solid check on it before I'll talk about it, or I'll introduce it, or I'll post it. And the reason for that is because, with the advent of propaganda being put into the United States through the National Defense Authorization Act of 2013, we don't know what's a true story anymore and not. But what we can be assured of is one thing. The mainstream ministry of propaganda will lie through its teeth to you, smiling the entire time. So I do seek out information on, not primetime news channels, but and media sources. But at the same point in time, I expect you, when I do post up anything, whether it's from a mainstream ministry of propaganda source, or if it's from an alternative source, I expect you to use your critical thinking skills, not as you read the story to determine whether or not it's right, wrong, or indifferent. What I want you to do is I want you to read it, but put with your secret critical thinking skill glasses on. I want you to read between the lines and understand what they are really, truly telling you. They can write it with a bias that's hard for you to identify. They can write it in a way that if you allow yourself and you're not focused on what you're doing and you're kind of half reading it, that you can easily get sidetracked and taken away from the idea of what they're really telling you, which you need to know. And reading between the lines and while you're thinking about it is a very critical and important skill. I'm going to give you an example. There's a new article this morning from the Washington Post. Now, the Washington Post is typically a ultra-left-wing liberal paper. They are sycophants and supporters of this administration, have been from Jump Street, and have been notoriously leftist in their agenda. However, they came out with the story today about the email provider who was used by Edward Snowden when he was capturing and forwarding information, I guess, to the guy in the UK, Glenn, whatever his name was, and the Washington Compost. So basically what the deal is this email provider was offering secure services, and they are now closing shop up. It's very interesting to understand why. I'm going to read you this story, and then I want you to spend a couple of minutes with me understanding it. The email service used by NSA leaker Ed Snowden is suspending operations. And they can't tell us why. Although this cryptic post heavily suggests this has something to do with a government request for information. Here's the quote. This is from the owners of the company. I have been forced to make a difficult decision to become complicit in crimes against the American people or walk away from nearly 10 years of hard work by shutting down Lavabit. That's the name of the company. After significant soul-searching, I have decided to suspend operations. I wish that I could legally share with you the events that led to my decision. I cannot. I feel you deserve to know what's going on. The First Amendment is supposed to guarantee me the freedom to speak out in situations like this. Unfortunately, Congress has passed laws that say otherwise. As things currently stand, I cannot share my experiences over the last 6 weeks, even though I have twice made appropriate requests. What's going to happen now? We've already started preparing the paperwork needed to fight for the Constitution in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. A favorable decision would allow me to resurrect Lavabit as an American company. Lavabit was created by a group. Okay. Here's what you need to recognize. What he's telling you between the lines is he's under a gag order. This is a national security letter example. And he's frozen, barred, prohibited from telling you how tyrannical they have been with him and his business over this Eric Snowden deal. You see, all he's offering is a service that allows people to send email away from prying eyes. And we as Americans have every right to do that. We do. I don't care whether you think national security is at risk. Frankly, I'm tired of hearing that as the excuse for every tyrannical terrorization of the American people. So stop thinking that way, because the truth is, Obama said it himself best on Leno. You have a better chance of being killed in a car accident than you do of being killed by a terrorist in the United States of America. And for the infinitesimally microscopic risk that you have of being killed by a terrorist attack, losing all of your 10 Bill of Rights outlined and enumerated preserved rights given to you by God and nature's God, not man, is a fool's game. You're giving up the kingdom, you're giving up your entire life, and you're giving up, for all intents and purposes, your birthright for the teacup, the Dixie cup of soup they're going to give you, which is protection. And the truth of the matter is, they can't even offer us protection. We saw that example, and the FBI came out and admitted it about the Boston bombers. They had these guys dead to rights and couldn't do anything about it. And or didn't want to do anything about it. And or this massive surveillance system they have had failed. Either because they couldn't get access to it, or they had so damn much information they didn't know where to find the needle in the haystack. Which is the alternative example, by the way, of why the NSA's program of seizing and capturing everybody's everything is BS. Because when you have that much data, you have massive overload and you can't find anything. That's the real problem, America. You see, this is not really being built for terrorism. That's what you have to understand. And that's the only plausible explanation you need to understand the depth of the depravity of where this is headed. It's not needed for national security, because for the infinitesimal opportunity for them to actually nab and nail a terrorist with it, they don't even want that data. What they really want is your data, because they're going to use this as a purging mechanism to identify who is not friendly, who is a domestic insurgent when the time comes. When does the time come? I don't know, but we're already seeing examples of it. The news came out yesterday that the IRS is still targeting Tea Party groups. So the president has, and this administration in general, now is using the IRS and has continued to use the IRS as a nuclear weapon against their enemies. Look, people, we already know, and this came out last week, and where is it? The New York Times article. This came out yesterday, by the way, and if you're not familiar with it, you ought to be. The New York Times came out that the NSA is searching Americans' email content, and they're doing it on a routine basis, despite what Obama tells you and everybody else in the NSA and everybody in Congress. They're all liars. Every last one of them. If their mouth is open, they're lying. And what's really happening here is they are building these massive dossiers on every American citizen. The ultimate end goal of all of this is so they have an opportunity to pick and choose who they're going to go after when the time comes. They want all of this information, not because they need to have a better grasp on where these terrorists are. They need a better grasp on where you are, where I am. They need to understand who threatens the regime of tyrants. Because truth is treason in an empire of lies. And that is the truth. They don't want you to understand the depth of how far this thing goes. The New York Times came out, reports that the NSA is searching through email messages of the American people on a massive scale, even in some instances where the messages are not to or from foreigners residing abroad. So all of these assurances that this isn't really what it sounds like, we're really only capturing, outside envelope information. Let me tell you something. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Kansas City that is a perfect deal for you. In fact, do me a favor, contact me immediately, give me the account number to your IRA, and I'll give you the perfect investment vehicle. It's oceanfront property in Kansas City. Please. The Director of National Security or National Intelligence, Clapper, has denied falsely that the NSA collected even data on phone calls. We know that was a lie. You see, here's the problem. The truth keeps shifting with these people. Every time they get caught with something else, they back off their last assurance that it was only some nominal monitoring of looking at things from 50,000 feet away from a satellite view. No, it's not that. They are actually scanning it not only with a telescope, not only with a microscope, but with an electron microscope. They're looking at everything. And that they don't have the time to look at now, they're saving to look at later. It's that easy, people. And anytime government has its hands on that much data, we as a republic are lost. We're down to the last few seconds of this first segment. I want to thank you for joining with us. Stick with us. On the second half, on our next segment, we're going to cover a couple of other issues, including the fact that the Obama administration is now using the housing department to diversify neighborhoods. Wait till you hear this one. You're not going to believe what's happening. Forced integration of racial issues is what's next. You watch and see. Stick with me, come back in just a couple of seconds, and we'll make sure that we cover this issue. You got to hear this one. It's Atlas Shrugged got written large all over it. Find us at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/americasvoicenow, and this and every other program that you should be sharing at youtube.com/americasvoicenow. We'll be right back.